It's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Patrick Harrison. He's from University of Hull, Department of Biology and Marine Science. But I think you live in Sheffield, don't you, Patrick? So
yeah, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold, so
okay.
if my voice good,
we'll do your best. Yeah, we'll bear that in mind.
I actually live a stone's throw away from Graves Park, so I found Ian's talk very interesting.
Yeah.
But I'm originally from Waterthorpe, which is in the southeast of the city. So I don't know how many people are aware of it. I know Ian is, and I know Fiona will be not too far from Birley.
Yeah. Okay.
So I suppose my talk really is very different from Ian's. Since what I'm going to talk about is actually trying to develop sort of a sense of place for current and future generations in this space. And I think listening to Ian's talk and obviously the work that you all do in the heritage area in terms of the built heritage, I think I'm hoping my talk for myself pose an interesting question of how do we, one of the things I'm trying to do in this area is develop this sense of place. But part where you have this, long history of old buildings and these heritage areas around. The area I'm talking about was really built in the 1970s and 80s. So obviously there's a history before that in terms of farming industry, but the actual physical buildings have all disappeared. So in terms of how, as part of this project I'm working on, it'd be really interesting, and I obviously invite anyone here who's interested in doing that, in developing an understanding of the area more that we can share with the local community and develop as a learning tool for children going forward. So, because obviously it's very different from probably more established areas of the city. So what is it I'm actually doing? So I'll start off by saying this is not my normal job. So and this slide works for ecology or heritage. So I'm actually a biochemist, and my work is looking at, antimicrobial drug development, really. So I purify compounds from generally venom, so snake and scorpion venoms, and make them into drugs. So it's quite different. So how did I end up, why am I talking now, and how did I end up trying to develop a wildlife corridor in the southeast of Sheffield? Well, when we look at, the drug development and whatnot, we're doing it to obviously cure disease. And if we're looking at sort of antimicrobial drugs, it takes about £1 billion, 1.2 billion, and about 10 or 12 years to develop a new drug. But if we look at what's happening in terms of antibiotic resistance, they're reckoned by 2050, 10 million deaths a year and £66 trillion lost. So we can either carry on like this, or we can have a new approach, and we can look to make people healthier and, fitter in their own environments, which I think is money spent in that area is far better than developing new drugs, in my opinion. So in that sense, in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I've had more of a philosophical shift towards prevention instead of the cure. And I think because I enjoy natural landscapes and going out and doing things like that, it's a natural progression for me to go on to. So I started thinking about this, and obviously the area I was from. So I'm just going to try and. So if anyone knows the South East of Sheffield, they'll be familiar with an area called sort of Waterthorpe and a place called Crystal Peaks, which is here on this map. Now, I was brought up about here, so my parents still live about there. So this area, so the Mosborough police station, if you can see it, is about there, and this is Mosborough sort of bypass, as it were. Pardon me. So I got thinking about this in terms of developing a space where we can run sort of outdoor learning and sort of well-being classes, and link the local people to their physical environment, so that, for develop almost well-being, space for well-being in that area. So I got talking to a guy called Phil Jackson, who is from Waterthorpe as well. He's from Doncaster originally, but he lives in Waterthorpe. And he just set up a group called Friends of Waterthorpe Park. The idea being to turn this almost neglected area. This neglected area. You've got woodland that's been planted in the sort of 1970s, really. And grasslands, but I'm assuming before it had just been farmland and whatnot. and basically look after it and make it a space where, you know, local people could use. If you can see here where that area here, when I was a kid, there was a little park there which obviously got probably burnt down, probably by a lot of my friends, if we're being truthfully honest about that, in the early 2000s. So that got scrapped. So basically for 20 years, this landscape has just been left. And Phil was trying to, you know, turn it back into a useful space. So we teamed up and we decided to try and try and do something about it in terms of, you know, make it a space where it's more useful for local people than just a place that's not just neglected, but also you know, you can put a playground in, but who's going to use it? So we want to make it more than that, make it almost an anchor institution for people to use. So, you know, Phil had already at this point and sort of talked about planting a community orchard. The idea being we can get orchards back in there, we can create a in time and income for the park, so we can, you know, sell the apples, and that can go in some way to funding, you know, renovations and improvements to the park. So this was in sort of 2019, 2020. It was all going well, so we got the you know, the orchard in, and we were talking to the local schools, and, you know, we were writing a national lottery grant. And then obviously March 2020, the world changed and COVID hit, so things sort of went on the back burner for a few years, really. Well, a couple of months. So what's the rationale of what we're talking about? Well, in terms of community health, you know, if we can get people sort of their physical activity increase, we can increase sort of education levels. We know that that has a decrease in sort of healthcare inequalities and chronic health problems. So if we can decrease healthcare inequalities in areas by making people sort of fitter and increase education levels, then, you know, does this have a decreased pressure on the healthcare system? We talk about the healthcare system in we currently spend about 14 billion pounds a year treating type 2 diabetes alone. You know, we can carry on putting money into the NHS as we keep increasing, as people get more unfit and, you know, society progresses, or we can try and do something about it on a prevention level. And I think that's where I'm really coming from. So from a community health perspective, I think developing these areas, linking ecology, health and education together, could be a really powerful notion of, you know, moving the city forward. From a school level, well, obviously we've got schools, you know, can we get those kids outside and learning outside? Because there is a lot of evidence to suggest that actually the outdoor learning setting, linking learning to being outdoors, is very good for mental and physical health in children, and it increases attainment levels in kids, particularly children who struggle in the normal sort of classroom setting. So children with ADHD and whatnot, we see an improvement in their learning when they're outside. I think as well, moving forward in the sort of post-COVID world, where we're trying to, you know, reduce not necessarily social contact all the time, but being inside all the time, you know, outdoor learning could have a real benefit to that. And as a side to that, you know, we talked about nature prescriptions. I did a similar talk to this in November for Ian, and William Bird, who has sort of developed the subscriptions thing, talked before me about, you know, actually when we get people outside, and if we can refer people from, you know, for example, high blood pressure or whatnot, instead of putting them on drugs, can we get them outside in the open space and use nature as a way of improving their physical and mental health? So then, how do we end up from Waterthorpe Park to a corridor? Well, in the summer of sort of 2020, I'm sure many of you will be aware of the debacle that was Althorpe Fields. So one of the things we thought about is, okay, well, can we incorporate, you know, Althorpe Fields into this idea of, you know, using it for mental well-being education? You know, can we link things up? So we decided to, instead of just sticking it at Waterthorpe Park, which is a bit further down, Waterthorpe Valley. This is Outfields, and this is a Westfield plantation for people who know that. That's Crystal Peaks, and in the background that's Rolla Valley. And Mosborough police station's about. So can we save this landscape? So instead of just saying to the council, you know, and developers and whatnot, we don't want this building on that's it. We want to have a more of a positive message to say, well, we don't want this built on because we can see an alternative view for this can be beneficial to the wider community that surrounds it. So out of that, the concept of the S20 Wildlife Corridor was born, and this sort of links up sites of ecological interest, and I've no doubt sort of heritage interest as well in terms of, you know, ancient landscapes that will appear throughout this. I mean, that's not the remit of what we're doing, but I think it's something that could potentially link in very well with. And the idea would be to link all these areas up in terms of enhancing the ecology, so we can create this wonderful natural corridor that runs through, as you can see, a very built up area all the way down to Rolla Valley eventually. And within that, we can have outdoor learning, we can have, you know, community wellbeing events running all the way along it, you know, all the time. These are the sort of things we're talking about doing in terms of putting more wildlife ponds in, more meadows in, more community orchards, you know, and really trying to enhance the ecology of it all the way along. So what are the aims of this? I've sort of talked about this. So really we have 4 aims. To become a space for the benefit of the local community on their doorstep, where people can engage with nature and which can provide relaxation, exercise to benefit both physical and mental health. At the local level, enhance and link several wildlife habitats such as meadows and wetlands to increase the biodiversity of flora and fauna in the area. Work with local schools and community groups along with our regional universities to develop outdoor learning and resources in all aspects and at every level of the curriculum. And work with Sheffield City Council social prescribing, people keeping well network to develop nature prescriptions to improve the health of the local community. So that's a sort of, you know, the basis of what we're doing really along the corridor, or trying to do, should I say. But not everything's gone to plan. So as many people who are following this, Althorpe Fields has ended up being built on. So despite the fantastic work of the Althorpe Field Action Group, have done a wonderful job of trying to save it. Site E, which is this area here, has ended up being built on. And, you know, so we went from, this was like before this area here, now this was September 2021, where they cut down all the trees and then removed an ancient hedgerow. Ian will probably talk out, will be better to answer that than I would be in terms of what year it dated from. But it's very sad to see now they've built houses on it. Interestingly, the developer even seems to have ignored the planning inspector's report, which looked at boreholes, well, they found coal in the boreholes. They've not done that, and they found a load of, as they took the surface off, it's full of coal. So I think that's looks like it's from the, is it Renishire sort of seam as well. So all that area. So it's going to cost them quite a lot of money extra to remove all this coal, because you can't just dump it. You've got to remediate it. However, you know, that's their problem now. So anyway, it really comes to why develop a community-based wildlife park here. And I think if you look at, so what we're looking at here is the indices of multiple deprivation. So I don't know if people are aware of this. So the darker the blue area, essentially the more deprived place is. And we can look at, you know, where the corridor runs. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of areas that are in the sort of top 10% deprivation within the country. You know, this is multiple deprivation, so it's got 7 different parameters, which I'm not going to talk about now. But we can also look at the health stats, which was Public Health England, or what it was formerly Public Health England, whatever it's called now. And we can see, looking at the sort of different wards, the Beighton ward, Birley ward, and Mosborough ward, the sort of health stats of where we are, and also the education stats. And if we look at the sort of significance of this from a statistical perspective, you know, a lot of these are significantly worse than this sort of national averages. So when we look at, for example, Mosborough ward, which is the ward I'm from, and basically the boundaries about here, down there, only 45% of students leave university or leave school with 5 A to C's, which is, you know, not very good, I think. And actually, the worst thing about it, which I'll move on to in a little bit, that sort of on a longer term inhibits your life chances and increases that cycle of deprivation. So can we use nature, and can we try and use this corridor idea to get kids outside, outdoor learning, to improve these health stats, to try and break this sort of cycle of deprivation and make people's life better ultimately by linking it to the ecology. And this has got an economic issue as well. So when we look at sort of these health stats, all these affect what we call healthy life expectancy. So healthy life expectancy in Sheffield is about 60 years, which is about the same as the rest of the country. However, there's big disparities in that. So in the least deprived areas, when we're talking sort of Dore, Totley, Ranmore, whatnot, people live to about 70 years old, being, fairly healthy before the health really starts to decline. In the most deprived areas, it's down at sort of 50 years. So Darnell, Manor, Westfield, places like that. So that's a big difference. But even at 60 years, with the retirement age at 66, that's 6 years people are living in poor health and working, which obviously has a major economic impact. But even if we just look at the cost of sort of mental illness, it's estimated, this is Greg Fell, who's the Director of Public Health report from 2016 or 18, I can't remember which one, that the Sheffield economy loses 100,000 days each year to mental illness alone, which costs £1 billion to the economy. The NHS spending in Sheffield is 1.1 billion. So and use these natural spaces to alleviate some of these mental health problems. Can we have a positive impact on the city? I suggest we could. Now, going back to which I'll show on this one. So I'll just suppose why develop a community space here? Well, we've got the indices for deprivation data suggests it's quite a deprived area. We've got education, skills and training. So in the sort of deprivation, education, skills and training, it's in the bottom 20%. It's some parts are in the bottom 10% for health deprivation. It's the amount of green space around that, it's in the top 20%, which suggests that we've got a lot to work with here. And when I talk about developing here, if we look at the city, we're all familiar that the major green spaces in the city on the west of the city. So not just the Peak District, but also Ecclesall Woods and Endcliffe Park, Graves Park, as we've just been talking about. On the east of the city, it's got some wonderful open green spaces, but are either neglected, not necessarily by the Sheffield City Council, although I don't think the same amount of money is put into those areas, but are just not used as much by local people. So I think the idea that, okay, we talk about Sheffield as a very the greenest city in Europe or whatever, and greenest city in the UK, but actually there's a big disparity between the east and west and who uses those sites, who uses that green space and what benefit they get from that green space from it. So we can talk about almost sort of a glass wall in Sheffield. This is again looking at the deprivation data, 2019, and we can see the lighter colours, compared to the dark colours. There's more deprivation on the east, as everyone knows. But also when we look at, this is what's called a tundra map. The tundra map being the number of students at the age 18 who go into further education, from higher education from state school. And again, there's a massive disparity here. So if we look at sort of Bents Green area, Whirlow and whatnot, over 80% of kids end up going to university. On the east, when we look at, say, Westfield, it's 15%. Manor Top's 14%. So, and again, in terms of developing corridors and working in sort of trying to link communities to this natural ecology, can we use that natural ecology that is present on the east of the city? Can we enhance it, and can we build in sort of community events and whatnot to try and break this cycle? Because on the west of the city, personally, I don't think it's as big of a problem. I think people are quite linked to those natural spaces I think it's more of a problem in the east. I think that's where we need, as a society and as a city, to focus our attention. I'm biased saying that, as I'm from the east of the city as well. So what's the big idea? Well, as I say, it's not just having a it's linking ecology, education, health together, but not having a top-down approach from it. So working with community groups, working with schools in every aspect of these different domains. So we'd have community groups who are interested in ecology, community groups who are interested in education, for example, the Scouts or the Girl Guides, community groups who are interested in health. So we're working with the Woodhouse Community Forum to develop sort of people nature prescriptions and sort of nature walks in that area, but also having sort of council experts on there, regional experts, and all working together sort of to try to create this corridor and almost making it a blueprint for the city. If we can do this here and we can get it working, can we do it in other places in the city? So we've talked about the S13 corridor, for example, parts of Woodhouse and Stradbroke. Could we do it there? And Fiona from Birley Spa, I mean, Birley Spa is absolutely beautiful. That links into other corridors as well. So I think and if we can do this in terms of use ecologies for enhanced sort of education and health, it means we're putting a lot of funding and a lot of money and a lot of attention into the ecology of our local area. What effect will that have? What positive effect will that have in nature's recovery within the city? It's almost by proxy, it'll do that. So where are we? So sort of education initiatives. So I'm currently submitting £160,000 bid to the National Lottery. So working with local schools, working with the Scouts and Girl Guides, etc., to develop infrastructure within the area that's called Waterthorpe Park. So just some outdoor learning activities, training for teachers and community practitioners on how to use that space. So not just to build it, but to give people the training of how actually to use that space safely, and to develop a toolkit of resources that can be used not just by the schools and by the community groups, but also it's freely downloadable by anyone. So if you want to take your grandkids out and do something in nature in the corridor, you can go on the website, download something and have a free activity. And again, in an area that's probably poorer than most areas of the city, having the ability, for example, in the school holidays to do something for free in your local area, I think could be a really good thing. In terms of developing health areas, what we're talking about is sort of developing mental and physical sort of initiatives, as it were. So that could be, for example, educational walks, contribute to scientific activity. So, for example, citizen science projects in terms of butterflies, monitoring and bug counts, bird counts and whatnot. We can look at sort of group activities in there, things like park runs, cider making from the apples, wood crafts. We've just got £8,000, or the Friends of Waterthorpe Park have just got £8,000 to look at developing sort of wood crafts areas and sort of hedge laying courses and whatnot. So we've got group activities you could do, sort of educational sort of passive talks in terms of you could go to talks in the park and whatnot, all linking the community to this area, developing a sense of space today and developing a sense of ownership. So it's their corridor, it's their history, it's their physical space that is for them to develop to utilize and benefit from physical and mental, physically and mentally. So all the sort of community health are all meant to align with the sort of 5 ways of keeping well. So around about being social, a bit of cognition, so learning new things, doing a bit of exercise, using this space in that way. So where are we now? Well, obviously we've got over the pandemic, which is we've not got over the pandemic. We're getting over the pandemic, I'd say. We've got planted a community orchard, which has got 70 apple trees. We've got another 50 going in March, which again planted by local schools. In total, within the area of Waterthorpe Park, we are looking to put 200 in. We've got 800 willow trees along the river that's been put in. We've got native hedging gone in. We've changed working with Sheffield City Council's Parks and Countryside Department, changed the grass cutting regime to allow the development of meadows in the area. We have got benches going in along the paths. So again, particularly the older generation in the area, and there's quite a lot of people over 70 in that area, can utilize that space and sit down and just relax. And because I think that's a very underthought of thing, that actually you've got this wonderful space, but people don't use it for most basic reasons. There's no benches. Well, if you can put 5 or 6 benches in, can we do that? We're putting scrapes in as well to collect water, beneficial for wildlife. We've got as I say, an education grant being put in, and we've started talks with talked to them, looking to develop nature walks with the social prescribing network and the people keeping well network over there. And the University of Sheffield are now involved in terms of highlighting this corridor to the local people. So they're all positives. On the negative side, site E has been destroyed, so part of the corridor, and there's been no long-term commitment from Sheffield City Council regarding saving site. The other 2 sites are now thought fields either, and the public awareness of the corridor in the area is quite low. This was highlighted. I was looking at taking 25 University of Sheffield students around the corridor, and they're all sort of, wow, this looks really nice. And one of my parents' neighbours walked past, who lived in the area for 45 years, and said they'd only found this place, which is about 100 metres from their house, after they retired. So is one area that we need to work on as well. So trying to build that. And I think, again, the other things are quite slow with a corridor. I think working with Sheffield City Council is quite hard in some ways. They have protocols that sometimes don't always work with community wishes and wants, and I think that they're quite slow at doing things. However, we are working on that, and I think we're getting to more. Just to show you what it's like, if you've never been. So when I say it's close to the housing, this has developed this space that is literally on people's doorsteps. You can see again that they're flats at the top. So we've got meadow development here. These trees were planted in 2013. We've got a beautiful hedge going up there. Got meadow development again. You can see the difference in grass cutting regimes. This is further down, so that's Waterthorpe Park. This is an area we're calling sort of Waterthorpe Meadows, which I believe is ancient woodland, although I think Ian may correct me on that. Again, we've got a bit of meadow development going on there, which is now 6 or 7 years old. And you can see this, a beautiful space. And if anyone's familiar with Crystal Peaks is about 50 meters from where this photograph's taken. So, this is how close it is to the urban environment. I think we just need to get people in those spaces. And that's about it. Thank you.